Morning, everybody. Good to see you. We are getting down to our last few meetings, so we have a really good presentation for you today. You get to see Dave again. He's back to talk with us about interviewing like a pro. I shared some interviewing questions under announcements, so you can go to those and he'll talk a little bit more about that. Once he's done, I'll go over everything that should be completed and your upcoming assignments, because you're putting together your culminating assignment and you've got your mock interview coming up. So we'll chat a little bit about that and go over any questions that you may have. So I'll pass it over to him and we'll get started.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you so much for having me come in again today. I am going to turn off the webcam here. There we go. Oops. Screen. There we go. All righty. I don't want to show the webcam. People can see you. There we go. All right. Are we off?
You paused.
I paused it? I didn't mean to pause it.
But, yeah, I'll share.
Sorry.
Let's see.
I've done this a million times. What's going on?
That's off.
Right.
If you don't want to see it, we
Right.
can just do that.
There you go. Okay, that's
And
what I was
then
looking for.
We got to
The
do
screen.
that
Right.
and
Share
share
the screen.
that. There we go.
There we go. Perfect. All right. Thank you. Sorry about the little technical difficulties. You'd think this was my first day, but I've done this a few times before.
So I'm going to click edit.
Oh,
There we go.
there we go. Perfect. Okay. So for those of you who were in the last session a couple weeks ago, I'll reintroduce myself. And for those of you who weren't able to make it that session, my name is Dave Wolfong. I work here at Washtenaw Community College in our Career Transitions Office. I am a career advisor. Basically, I help the students and the alumni, as well as community members, find employment. We do that in a lot of different ways. I know colleagues have came in and talked about some different things. I talked about resumes. There's been discussions about cover letters. But what I want to talk to you today about is the interviewing phase of the whole hiring process. And we'd like to spend some time with job seekers talking about the things that you can do to be more successful during interviews, because there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of nervousness that comes along with the interview part of this the hiring process. So there are some simple things that you can do to kind of reduce that anxiety, feel a little bit more confident in the interview and talking about yourself, answering questions, asking questions of the interviewer, all kinds of things we're going to be talking about today. And some of these things are very simple. And you may be aware of some of them may be new to you, but these are types of things that you can definitely kind of incorporate into your own practices when you're getting ready to get out there for job interviews, as well as I know you have a mock interview coming up. Some of these things could actually be incorporated into your mock interview assignment as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So there we go. Typically, in most cases, the interview is the second phase of the hiring process. The first phase is you have submitted a resume or completed an application and submitted that for a position that you are looking to get to work in a certain career field. It could be nursing, it could be automotive service technician, whatever. There's you submitted a resume, submitted an application to a company for a job that they have open. And as I have on there, congratulations, because just getting an interview in today's job market, which is incredibly competitive, doesn't matter what field you want to work in, sometimes getting that interview is a badge of honor, something to kind of pat yourself on the back about, because there may have, as I have on the screen there may have been dozens, if not hundreds of other people who are going for that same job. And they're not going to interview everybody, of course. Usually what we hear from employers is about 10% of applicants get pulled in for an interview or get called in for an interview. So a very small number. So if you're one of 88 applicants, they're probably only going to interview 4 to 6 people, maybe 7 max. They just don't have the time and the people power to interview everybody who applies. So it's a very small percentage of those job applicants that make it to the interview phase. So that's something to really be kind of prideful about and be proud about, because you have made a connection with them. There's something about you on a resume, an application, cover letter, whatever documentation you supplied that really struck a chord with them, that showcased to them that you are a great candidate for this job. So you've made it to that next level of the interview. So that's something to be proud about. Now, I don't want to assume everybody in the audience has ever gone through an interview. So I do want to talk a little bit about sort of the different aspects of an interview. Honestly, an interview has two parts or two purposes. The first is you are showing to the employer why you are the perfect candidate. So they're going to learn more about you. They know a little bit about you from a resume or an application, but this is your time to go into much more detail and go and be more explicit about the types of experiences, the types of education, training, work, military experience, whatever it might be. This is your opportunity to shine. Remember, they're interested in hiring you because they brought you in for an interview. So there's an interest there. It's your time to capitalize it by going into much more detail about you. But there is another purpose of interviews. You are also learning about them. You're learning about the company to a certain extent. We're going to talk about researching companies here in a moment, but you really don't get a good feel of what a company is actually like until you get onto the interview site or into the interview site. Let's say you really want to work in IT. Let's say you want to be a web designer, and you get an interview at a company, and you go in, and as you're walking through the campus or walking through the building, you take a look around, and everyone seems very happy. There's a lot of energy, a lot of positive energy. Things look very well organized. It seems to be running very efficiently. All the tech and software seems to be up to date and current. And you're getting a good vibe from the employer, just being on site, just being in the interview, and you're like, oh, this feels like a good place for me. So sometimes it can have a positive aspect that it makes you want to work for that company that much more. Sometimes it has the other reaction in that you get onto the employer site and you look around and people don't seem very happy. Everything seems to be disorganized. The tech is out of date. It's starting, and you're getting kind of a different vibe. Like maybe this isn't the right place for me. So they're going to be learning about you just as much as you're learning about them. So it's kind of that two-way street. And those are the two main purposes of an interview. So I want to start or continue the conversation with the different types of interview formats that you may encounter as you're going through the hiring process. And I'll kind of go through them briefly. Each are a little different. They have a lot of similarities, but there are some specific nuances, I guess, for each different type of interview. The first, of course, as I have listed in the red, is a phone interview. And just as a sound, that's an interview that is conducted over the phone. You need to take this very seriously. You need to act just as if the individual is sitting in the same room with you, even though there's kind of a distance between you because you're on the phone. So act accordingly, be very professional. Do not be doing anything else. If you're on your cell phone, don't be driving in your car or doing chores or walking your dog. I've heard all kinds of horror stories over the years of employers hearing things in the background during phone interviews that showed that the interviewee was not concentrating on the discussion. So make sure that you are in a quiet space, someplace where there's no loud distractions in the background, someplace where you're not going to be distracted. So if you're doing it at home, maybe do it in a bedroom where you can close the door so there's no dogs barking or kids or family members running around and making noise in the background. Do it in your bathroom, do it in a closet, someplace where there's some quiet where you can concentrate, okay? The one-on-one interview there in the green, that's a more traditional formatting of an interview you're probably aware of, where there's one interviewer and one interviewee. It's a very common interview format. Now, down in the purple is kind of the opposite of that, a committee or panel where you have multiple interviewers, sometimes 2, 3, 4, if not more than that, with one interviewee. Okay, so you are kind of like on the spotlight there, where you have multiple interviewers all asking you questions, and that can be a little bit difficult. It can be a little bit more anxiety producing because multiple people are asking you questions, but it's definitely something you need to prepare for. And to be honest, the committee or panel interview is starting to take the place of the one-on-one interviews. There's more of a reliance on employers on instead of having just one perspective on a candidate, where the one-on-one would have just one person's view on a candidate and whether or not they're a good fit, whereas a committee or panel interview, there's multiple people there, so they're getting multiple perspectives on whether or not you're a good candidate. All right. Now, I also have in the purple there group interviews, and that's a little different. That's where there is one interviewer and there's a whole room of interviewees, sometimes 10, 20, if not 30, all interviewing for the same position. A lot of companies like Kohl's, Xfinity, Comcast, Target, those larger companies that need to do some bulk hiring, especially around the holidays when they need a lot of people. So they may do these types of group interviews where there's one interview, and then there's, you know, a whole room, like think of a classroom full of interviewees, all being asked the same questions. So again, that could be anxiety producing in its own right, where you're fighting against all the people sitting around you for the same job. And there may be multiple positions open, but you're all going for something that might be a little scarce and that there's not enough jobs for everybody. So, you know, they're hiring for 10 people and there's 20 people in the room interviewing. That means that half of you aren't going to get that job. So it is a new, somewhat new phenomenon. Like in the last 5 or so years, these group interviews have been really becoming more popular. And depending on the type of job you're going for, you may face that type of scenario. And then in the blue there at the bottom, electronic Skype or distance interviewing, we call it. And that is very similar to what we're doing today on GoToMeeting. If the webcam was on, it's doing an interview that is over distance, and typically it's either if you're interviewing outside of the state, or maybe if it's someplace like Traverse City or Escanaba or someplace where it's a bit of a drive up to the actual interview site. Typically, a first interview might be conducted over, you know, a distance of platform like Skype or GoToMeeting or Adobe Connect or Blackboard Collaborate, I think is they have a system on Blackboard now that you can use. So there's all these different types of formats that can do distance interviewing. Now, it's very similar to phone interview, except they can see you now, okay? So there's a distance between you and the interviewers, which can have an impact on how you react to certain questions, but also they can see you, at least from the waist up. So you want to dress professionally, at least from the waist up. You can have pajama bottoms, underneath, but they're seeing you. So make sure that you dress professionally for this. Make sure all your technology is up to date. Maybe you've only used Skype once, it was like 4 or 5 years ago, and you haven't done an update to your app or whatever you might be using. So make sure your technology is up to date. That's what we hear big problems with this type of format is mute was on and I couldn't, just like I stumbled around here in the beginning of our presentation today. We don't want that happening in an interview because again that kind of reflects poorly on you as a candidate. So make sure your technology is up to date. You still dress professionally because they can see you. Now, also, as I mentioned with the phone interview, you need to do a Skype interview where it's not like in your living room or your dining room where people are going to be walking behind you or there's loud noises. If you can come onto campus and get a library room or study room where it's quiet, or someplace in your house where there's no distractions, people walking behind you. If you do it at home, make sure your background is kind of neutral, so take down pictures or something like that so there's nothing distracting in the background either, because employers do appreciate that kind of neutral background with no distractants. Okay, so those are just some very common types of interview formats you may run into as you're out there job hunting. Now, I've always used this kind of corny phrase here that you are the foremost expert on yourself. You are you know yourself inside and out, okay? And you may not think about yourself all the time, that's true, but you know you more than anyone else will in your entire life. And so that's what employers are kind of expecting when you come in the door, that you are an expert on you. And so you need to be able to talk in detail about you and your history. And I have a few examples here: education in your training background, employment history, and skills and abilities. Those are just a couple kind of broad categories that they might ask questions about. So you need to know like where you went to school, degrees or certificates that you got from those different schools. Where did you work? What were the employment dates? What type of position or title were you in? What were your responsibilities in that position? And being able to talk about this in detail. They may ask you a question, they may come right out and say, what skills do you possess that make you a qualified candidate for this position? So you need to be able to talk about your skill sets. They may ask you about volunteerism. They may ask you about if you have military experience, especially if these are on a resume or application. So they may ask you about those kinds of things. So kind of use this idea of where you are the expert on you and your background, and being able to talk in detail about your work history, your education history, and other things about you, because you are the expert on you. Okay. Another thing that you want to do is researching the employer. A very common interview question is, tell me what you know about my company or my business or my organization or my department, whoever you might be interviewing with. If they ask you that and you just don't have any information for them, you sit there with kind of a blank look on your face, that really is 2 strikes against you, because they're going to think, well, why did this individual apply to us? Just the fact that we were hiring, or was it something special about us? And that's what they want to hear. They want to see that you have a vested interest in working with them, so you have done some research on them. How do you do the research? Easy. You just go right to their corporate company organizational webpage. Just go online, do a Google search for the company's name, go to their page, their history or an About Us page, and take a look through some information about the company. Now, they don't want you to talk for like a half an hour about them. Okay, I don't want you to think that either. I want you to kind of think about 4 or 5 things that you want to tell the employer, to show that you've done your homework on them. And that shows that you're that much more interested and motivated to work for that company. For example, if you're trying to get a job here at Washtenaw Community College, we may ask you in the interview, and it is a very common question here, what do you know about WCC? And you could say, well, I know that Washtenaw Community College is one of the premier community colleges in Michigan, having been established in 1968, and that you typically have 12,500 students on campus and every semester, with 125 certificate, degree, blah, 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 blah. So that's the type of information they want to hear from you. So you did a little bit of research, right? Now, if they ask you, what do you know about us, and you try to fake it, some people try to do that. Don't do that. Just do some due diligence and do a little bit of research ahead of time. It's not going to take very long. And that is one thing that's important to remember. It'll take you 10 seconds to get on Google, 10 seconds to find the page on the company's website, do a little bit of research, 5 minutes worth of work. And if they ask you, what do you know about us, and you don't have any information for them, they're going to think, well, this individual didn't take 5 minutes to do some research. How invested is he or she in working for us? So again, one of those things is always research the employer ahead of time. Okay, so there are a couple different forms of interview questions. And I know I sent over a whole list of them, a very long list, I realize. But interview questions typically break up into two broad categories. The first is what's called the traditional information seeking questions. Those are things like, tell me about yourself. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What was your favorite class at Washtenaw Community College? Those types of questions. They're eliciting information from you. And with the questions I sent over, I know it's a long list, but you might want to read through that list and come up, pick out 25 questions and come up with answers, write them down, memorize them to a certain extent, practice with a friend or family member, and to get a little bit more comfortable in answering those types of questions. Because you're definitely going to be asked those traditional information seeking questions, as well as a second type, which are more behavior-based questions. They are a little bit more difficult to answer, and actually they're becoming more and more common in interview sessions, so it's something to be prepared for. They are questions that are typically structured like, tell me about a time that something happened and what was the result. So tell me about a time that you had a conflict with a coworker and what was the result. Tell me about a time that you were working in a team on a project and there was a team member who wasn't carrying his or her weight. How did you handle that situation? Tell me about a time that you didn't make a deadline or something you were working on didn't meet your expectations and what was the result. So it's kind of taking a look back at your own history, your experiences you've had in the classroom, in the workplace, in your own personal life, and reflecting about how those situations kind of impacted you and how you handled them. The conflict question is very common. Tell me about a time you had a conflict with a supervisor or a coworker or a customer. Those are different types of questions they may ask because they want to see how you handle communication, how you handle working, handling conflict in either the classroom or the workplace. That's a very common question to prepare for. The one about the teammate that was not carrying his or her weight. That happens, that question's asked a lot too, because they want to see how you handle the team environment and how you work in a team. And so there are these behavior-based questions also included in that long list that I sent over earlier in the week. Now, for behavior-based questions, there is a great method of answering them. It's something you may want to look into. So, and I can send over this PDF later today. It's called the STAR method, S-T-A-R, and you can actually Google search it and you'll see all kinds of information, but I'll send over a PDF later today. STAR stands for Situation, Task, Action, Result. And it's a human resources, tried and true human resources system for answering behavior-based questions. So you may want to do a little bit of research, and I'll also send over some information that can be shared with you as well. So these are the kind of the two big types of questions you might be asked. Now I know there are all kinds of different questions I know employers ask. They're almost like lateral thinking questions or kind of weird ones. So, and I know employers have asked, you know, if you were a flavor of ice cream, which would you be? You know, if I gave you $1 million, what would you do with it? Almost like personality or psychological test questions. I know the couple that I read in an article recently that Fortune 500 companies ask is, you know, if you had to get rid of one of the 50 states, which would it be and why? If you had to stack quarters up in front of the Empire State Building, how many quarters would it be? You may get asked these kind of weird questions, I know, and they're a little bit harder to prepare for, but it's basically do your best with those. Put a lot of thought to them. The Empire State Building question, you know, they're not looking for an answer that is correct. They're looking for your thought processes and those kind of things. So they're kind of lateral thinking questions you might get asked. There's sometimes these weird kind of curveball questions that they ask that you just need to kind of prepare for, because there may not be a right or wrong answer. It's more about your thought process to answering the questions. Okay. Now, typically in interviews, most interviews, I guess, I would say on average are about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, right around there. That's a good average. And within that time frame, you're typically again going to be asked between 10 and 15 questions. All right, so kind of preparing for that. And so in that time frame, in terms of, I always get asked about response time. How long should I talk? How in detail should my answers be? How long or how short? So what I always suggest is, if you kind of even break it down by numbers, is your responses, your answers to questions that they're asking you should be between 2 and 3 minutes long. Okay. It could be a little shorter, it could be a little longer, but we don't want you to go too long. We see that quite often where people, especially if they're really nervous, have a tendency to ramble and they kind of lose their train of thought and they start to go down that rabbit hole a bit and they forgot what they were talking about. They forget what the question was. And so sometimes being a little concise in getting to the point is a good strategy. You don't want to be too short either. If you go into an interview that starts at 12 noon and you get out like in 5 minutes, you probably made some mistakes. And traditionally, again, kind of looking at half an hour, probably at a minimum, usually around 45 minutes. Okay, so think about that, 2 to 3 minute response time, even as you're practicing, even as you're writing down, do your mock interviewing, think about that. A couple minutes worth of talking seems like a long time, but it'll go very quickly and you get a lot of information in those 2 minutes, okay? So I get asked that a lot about how long should I talk, and 2 to 3 minutes is kind of a good window to shoot for. All right. A big part of interviewing is dressing successfully, dressing professionally. And So I get asked all the time too. So how should I dress? What is professional? What is business casual? What have you? There's all kinds of questions. So and it's easy for me to say, you know, that you can go out and get a new suit, you know, or something of that nature. But I do realize that you know, finances can be very tight for some individuals, especially if you're job hunting. So dressing for success also doesn't mean spending a lot of money. There are places like the Salvation Army, you know, Goodwill, places like that who have gently used articles of clothing that people have donated. They're also, you know, inexpensive places like even Walmart has professional clothes. So it doesn't mean you have to run out and get a Tom Ford suit or something like that, though. That would be nice, but you know, but dressing for success doesn't mean spending a lot of money. Okay. Now, as I have here on the screen, and we're going to go into more detail here in a few moments, you always want to dress professional. Never jeans, you know, never t-shirts, never sneakers, nothing like that. That's way too casual, or shorts or what have you. Always dress professionally. Now, let's say you want to be a nurse or a dental assistant or something in healthcare where you're going to be wearing scrubs every day. That's your uniform on the job. I've heard from job seekers will say, well, I'm not going to be wearing, you know, a business suit on the job. Why should I dress up for an interview? Well, it's just part of the process, part of playing the game. And you do have to dress up, dress professionally for interviews. Doesn't matter what type of job you're trying to get. You want to impress the employer. All right, if you show up and you walk into the interview room and you're wearing cutoff jean shorts and a tank top and, you know, ball cap, and it looks like you just rolled out of bed, you know, that's not going to impress an employer. Okay, and you could be the perfect candidate for them. They brought you in for an interview for a reason, because they were interested in you, and we don't want you to kind of blow it because you didn't dress professionally. And dressing professionally also means good hygiene as well. So that's why on this list is things like, getting a haircut, clean hands, clean fingernails, brushing your teeth, shaving, all that good stuff is part of dressing for success. Okay. Now, some other minor things to be aware of. Keep things like any type of scents, like perfume, cologne, hairsprays, anything of that nature, body sprays, if you were using body spray, Axe or something like that. I don't know if people still do that or not, but keep it to a minimum. Even makeup, and for female job seekers, don't wear a lot of jewelry, or for male job seekers as well. Especially if you wear like a lot of things that might clang while you're talking, or if you're wearing a lot of bracelets that might bang up against the table as you're talking, so they can be really distracting. So keep everything minimum, okay, with that, like smells or scents, odors, because someone in the room that you're interviewing with may be sensitive to those kinds of things as well. They may have allergies or be allergic to something, and that might be all they remember about you, is that you had a lot of perfume or some scent that kick-started their allergies, instead of anything else that you shared during the interview. Don't have a lot of things in your pockets. Don't take a lot with you into the interview in general. A portfolio or a padfolio, as I have here, something that has like a legal pad in it that you can put copies of your resume, references, any type of documentation you want to share with the employer. Have a pen in there as well. Take that with you, but not like big purses or big backpacks or book bags or anything of that nature. Keep it to a minimum in terms of anything that you're bringing into the interview. And as I have there, don't chew gum, don't smoke during an interview, of course. I don't know when the last time that's happened, but I actually was on an interview just a few years ago. I was on an interview panel here at the college. We were hiring for an advisor's position, and actually it was the second interview, and these two candidates were really interested in hiring. And my number one candidate, actually, she came in and she was chewing gum during the interview. She was my number one selection, and it was just distracting. As you were sitting there talking to her, that's all I could concentrate on, is that she was chewing gum during the entire interview. And this is a professional individual with years of experience, and should have just known better, But we ended up not hiring her, not for that, but for other reasons as well. But it was just a distractant, so don't have anything in your mouth. Some people will, I'm worried about having bad breath or something, so as they drive in, they'll, pop a mint or something like that. That's okay, but just make sure you spit it out before you go into the interview. Now here, for male job seekers, these are some do's and some don'ts. Just quickly, as you can see, again, dressing for success doesn't always having to wear a three-piece suit or a suit in general, but usually I suggest kind of aim high. If you do have a suit or a sport coat with a nice pair of dress slacks, that'd be fine. Well, I would always suggest, wearing a tie, even though on the left-hand side gentleman with the blue shirt, he isn't wearing a tie. I would suggest wearing a tie. For male job seekers, make sure you know how to tie a tie. There's YouTube videos, there's howtotieatie.com, believe it or not, that you can take a look at to learn how to tie a tie. Go with dark colors, and usually natural tones, so blacks, blues, charcoal grays, dark browns, dark navies, of course. You can have a little bit of color, like on a tie, but you don't want to overdo it. Make sure everything fits appropriately, unlike on the lower don't side where it looks like the suits is from like grade school or something. So make sure everything fits appropriately. If you've gained weight, or even if you've lost weight and your clothes kind of bag on you, you may want to look into purchasing some new clothes. Everything fits, is pressed, everything goes together. Up here, like on the don't, the dress shirt and the cotton khakis are kind of a mismatch. So make sure everything matches and is appropriate for the season as well. So if you're interviewing like in July, don't wear like heavy wool clothes or something like that. So dress appropriately for the season as well. And then for female job seekers, now the candidate on the right-hand side under the don't, now she looks very professional in comparison to some of the ones on the male job seeker slide, but it's just way too casual. That's the issue there. Too many bright colors, again, kind of avoiding those bright colors. Necklace, big bag, those types of things. We want to go more conservative. Really, that's what it is. It's being conservative. So kind of think about, for female job seekers, the left-hand side more than the right-hand side of the slide here. Again, she looks nice, but it's just way too casual for the interview setting. Okay, so this is part of the process. Again, you got to dress professional. It doesn't matter what type of job that you're going for. If it's a full-time, being a teacher someplace, or if it's a part-time working at Target, still dress professional, okay? Because the employer expects it, and it could impact whether or not they hire you. So, now what to bring with you to the interview, okay? So let's say you get a call right now, 12:05 on a Wednesday, with a company that you had interviewed or had applied to. Let's say you want to be a nurse, and it's with a hospital in Lansing. And so you're like, yes, I got an interview. And they want to set up an interview with you, so let's say Friday at 10 a.m. And so you're like, yes, I got an interview. I'm so excited. So now you've got some time to get prepared. So you want to get, of course, all your clothes together. Don't wait till the morning of your interview to start trying to get things together, and you can't find your shoes, can't find a belt, and that's adding to your anxiety because you can't find the right clothes. So have all your clothes together, all your dress together the night before, as well as everything that you want to take with you. So make sure you, of course, have the location and the name and contact information for the company that you're interviewing at, but also if you're provided a name of an interview contact. So when you check in at a reception desk, you'll be able to say, hi, my name's Dave Wolfong. I have an interview with Mrs. Jones at 10 a.m. So again, have that information for you. Also, know how to get there. One of the big cardinal sins you can commit in interviews is showing up late. And you can say, well, I was only 2 minutes late. Well, this is the most important meeting you're going to have with the employer, typically. And if you show up late, they're going to say, well, how seriously is this candidate taking it if he or she shows up late? So know how to get there. Put it in your phone, get your app, Google Map app, if that's what you use. Know how to get there. You may want to take a test drive the day before. Just if you have the ability to do that, just to see how to get there. Is there going to be construction? You can look on Michigan Department of Transportation. They have all the construction laid out in the state of Michigan. I know we're finally getting out of winter, but if let's say you had a January interview time and the night before it snows real bad. You may want to take some extra time to get there, because what you want to aim for is getting to the interview site a minimum of 15 minutes early, okay? And that includes parking. You know, you may have to park in a ramp or park in a surface lot and then walk a block or so. So you got to incorporate that time into parking and walk time to the site, because you do not want to be late, okay? That's 2 strikes against you, and you're going to have to win them back a lot if you show up late to your interview, okay? Also take copies of resume, copies of references. You may have a panel interview of 4 or 5 people, and maybe not everybody has a copy of these documentation. So, excuse me, so take copies of anything that you want to share with the interviewers, take copies with you. And of course, paper, pen, you know, like a legal pad in your portfolio. And as I have on there, professional portfolio, some industries like, graphics design or photography, you'll actually have a professional portfolio with examples of your work. You can take that with you as well. And of course, questions you want to ask the employer. All right, and we'll get to that here in a few moments. So you'll show up 15 minutes early. So I said 10 a.m. on Friday. You'll get to the interview site 9:45. You'll walk in. As soon as you walk into the interview site, you walk in the door, or even if you once you drive into the interview site's parking lot, you put your game face on. You got your professionalism right then and there. Because if you walk up and you're rude to the receptionist or the secretary or the check-in person, and you're acting unprofessional, you're talking real loud on your phone while you're waiting in the lobby, that secretary or receptionist or that front counter person may be asked about your behavior while you're waiting. And if the receptionist says, well, Dave was really rude to me when he checked in, you know, that could hurt your chances of getting hired. So you got to kind of, not to make you paranoid, but you kind of got to have this feeling that everybody's keeping an eye on you, okay? So someone in the interview panel will come out and get you, and you want to shake hands. Shake hands with everyone, as I have in the second bubble there. This is a good way of introducing yourself. Always have a nice firm handshake and introduce yourself to everybody. When you get into the interview room, there is, as I have there, a certain type of interview etiquette that you need to use, okay? Certain types of professional behavior. This isn't a conversation like with your parents or spouse or partner or family friend or anything of that nature. It's not that casual. This is a very professional communication situation, right? So there's certain things that you need to do while you're in that that interview. You know, be very aware of body language. You know, do not slouch. You want to stand and sit kind of up in your chair. Don't slouch. I have a tendency to slouch all over the place. That's just kind of me. But in an interview session, you want to kind of practice those things. I have a tendency to talk with my hands a lot. I gesture a lot while I'm talking. I'm doing it right now, even though you can't see me. And that's something that's kind of looked unprofessional in some cases. It's even for some cultures, it is actually a little bit offensive to talk a lot with your hands. It just depends. So it's one of the things you want to control. Practice good eye contact. Don't stare at people, but engage them in conversation. And that's hard. Eye contact sometimes can be very difficult. I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and sometimes I even have trouble doing that. So it is something that you need to practice. You want to kind of engage them in conversation, but don't sit there and stare at them directly. That becomes a little awkward. Having good energy. Don't talk down to your chest. Hi, my name's Dave. Blah, 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 you know, and they want people who have good levels of energy. They want to hire you. They don't want to hire a Debbie or Danny Downer, okay? Basically, to be honest, it's everything that you were taught in kindergarten to do when you were a younger student of how to behave in the classroom. You kind of practice the same things during the interview. All right, so it's very important. Don't, you know, I've seen interviewees who come in, they kind of slouch all over the place, or they're staring down at the table, kind of talking in a monotone, and it really impacts whether or not you want to hire that individual. So be aware of kind of your behavior during the interview. Okay, it's kind of a stilted conversation. Yes, I realize that. And it's going to be about 45 minutes. I understand that as well. But you want to, again, have that professionalism. You know, don't be too casual. And one thing you want to be keenly aware of is when you're answering questions or you're talking to them in general, Avoiding things like, hi, my name is, like Dave. Those kinds of things, which happens all the time, that type of filler sounds, not even words in some cases, that you want to be. See, I do it right there. Once you're aware you're doing it, it's going to drive you insane. So I did it right there. And you don't even know, because it's a habit, and we all do it. We all do it. And we do different things. I have a tendency, just like I did there, I stretch out words. I, so, well, and just so I can get to my next thought. It's common. It's a habit. We all do these types of things, but we want to avoid that. Again, remember, this is a professional communication situation. And if you're saying, hi, my name is Dave, and some of that is anxiety, sometimes the nervousness. I was at a conference, a couple of years ago now, and the presenter, I think it was her first time she'd ever presented in front of a large audience, and she literally was like saying this. Hi, my name, and you feel for the individual, because they're just nervous, and we've all been there. But also at the same time, it's hard to connect with the individual. It's hard to get that information if they're saying all these kind of filler words, and it's really ruining the cadence of the communication. So if you can, as you're doing mock interviewing and you're practicing, be aware of those kind of filler noises or filler words that you use, and avoid them as much as possible. Okay. Now, the very last thing on this, the last bubble, the purple bubble there at the bottom, one of the big complaints I hear from employers is people's cell phones going off during interviews, even buzzing. Some phone models have very strong vibration modes, and it's a real distracting. And it can throw off the cadence of the conversation. Again, to use my own background as an example, a couple of years ago, I was on an interview panel, and one of the interviewees, it was her birthday. And so she came in, and like her phone was blowing up the entire time of like getting texts, happy birthday stuff and all of that. And we eventually said, do you want to just turn that off? Because it's kind of distracting, And so that's what we don't want to happen. So turn off if you have a pager still, I guess, but if your cell phone, turn it off. Don't just put it in, quiet mode or vibration mode. Just turn it off completely so it's not a distractant. And again, that's something that an employer will appreciate. So again, they're going to ask you questions, but you will also have an opportunity to ask them. And I mentioned this a couple slides ago. You may want to come to this session, the interview session, prepared with some questions, 3 to 5 questions. And you can do some Google interview questions to ask. You can kind of check that out. But employers like to hear that you have questions for them. It shows that you are interested in working for them, that you have an interest in being part of their team or in being in that position. So it is good to ask questions. There could be some that you bring with you, or maybe organically that have came up during the course of the conversation. You could say, well, I do have one question. You had mentioned a couple of questions ago about this research program that you have. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about that. So maybe something that comes up during the course of the interview. I say, ask about, is there going to be a second interview? Is there going to be a third interview? Some interviews or some positions have multiple interviews. When is the hiring date? Why is this position open? Are you going through a period of expansion? I also like asking, walk me through a typical day. As soon as I come into my shift and turn the lights on till I leave at the end of my shift and turn the lights off, what is a typical day in this position? And they're going to say, well, there's no such thing as a typical day here at blah, blah, blah. But at least you'll get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain in terms of how things run inside the company or inside the department. Now, of course, I have there on the last bullet, do not ask about anything pertaining to salary or rate of pay. Benefits packages, time off, vacation time, sick time, anything of that nature, that is not to be asked, especially in a first interview. That is something that could be discussed like in a secondary interview or a tertiary or a third interview, or when they offer you the job. Never accept a job without knowing these, how much you're going to get paid. I've had students in the past say, I accepted the job, I don't know how much I'm getting paid. I'm like, whoa, you should always ask. So, but don't ask in the interview. Wait till they offer you the position, and that's the time for a good discussion about those types of things, okay? So that's one thing you do not want to ask them about. Now, so you wrap up the interview. There are some important things that you need to do after the interview, and some people forget about these. So as you're wrapping things up, make sure you get a business card from everyone who was on your interview panel. panel. If it was one person or if it was 5 people, ask for a business card from each individual. Because what you want to do within 24 hours, you want to send a thank you to everybody that you interviewed with. Now, 2 schools of thought, email versus actual physical, tangible thank you card. It's kind of up to you. Emails are quicker, of course. You can send it real fast. Thank you cards, put in the mail, snail mail, takes a little bit more time. But I will say this, employers have told me that there's something to getting an actual tangible physical thank you card from an interviewer or interviewee, excuse me, that makes a big difference. And it sits on their desk and it's a reminder of who you are. So that is something you may want to think about going to like Dollar General, getting some blank interview thank you cards, and just put in, "Dear Mr. Smith, thank you for having me in to interview for the nursing assistant position. Hope to be hearing from you soon. Cordially, Dave." Something very simple like that. And that could be the same in the email. But they're expecting this. This is a way that they close the conversation or close the loop on the conversation with you, is these thank yous. So get them in the mail or email them within 24 hours of your interview, because we want to get them to the interviewers very quickly. You can always follow up with them in a few weeks. You'll have their contact information and on the business cards. It's always a good idea to maybe follow up with the employer if you don't hear from them within 7 to 10 business days, just to see what's going on. Don't call them the next day or the following day. Give them a little bit of time. They may be doing multiple interviews. Maybe people go on vacation before they can make a decision. People get sick, things happen. So give them a little bit of time. 7 to 10 business days is a good window to shoot for. Finding a job, I say this a lot, is a job in and of itself. Okay, it's a full-time job, and you have to dedicate yourself to remaining positive. This may take a little bit of time. And you don't want to say, well, I got an interview, I know I'm going to get it, I'll stop looking for work. Well, no, maybe you still want to continue looking as you're waiting for job offers to come in. You don't want to miss out on any opportunities. Now, one thing, before I move on, let me pop back. I didn't include it, I apologize. I updated this presentation a couple days ago. But also, as you leave the interview site, stop in the lobby or stop in your car and write down the questions they asked you, and then also write down the answers that you provided. You may have to go through multiple interviews for the same type of job. If you're trying to get a position as a nursing assistant, you may have multiple interviews for a nursing job with multiple different hospitals or healthcare organizations. And places sometimes have a tendency to ask similar questions. And so maybe there's something very specific that you're hearing in these nursing assistant interviews or whatever type of job you're trying to get that you can prepare for. So write down the question, do a brief overview of your answer. And if you think you did a good job, say, oh, this is a good one. If you think you didn't do very good in answering that particular question, make a note, say, I need to practice this, or I need to come up with a better answer. I just feel like I didn't do a good job in responding to this question. So do a little bit of reflection as you leave. Don't do it like 3 days later because you won't remember. So kind of capture that information while it's in the moment and still fresh on your mind, and write it down so you can prepare for future interviews as well. All right. So any questions at all about what we were talking about here? Let me take a drink. Yeah, I'll give him a minute. Okay, thank you, Sierra. Anyone else? No, I've blown them away.
You're so thorough.
I try. And I know it's a lot of information to absorb in a quick period of time. I can totally understand that. And actually, I can even go into much more detail. I have 2.5 hour presentations on this where we really do a deep dive into certain aspects of doing mock interviewing and that type of thing as well. So I realize it's a lot of information to absorb. But if you do have any questions or do need any assistance at all, my department, Career Transitions, is here to help you. You know, if it's resumes, if it's job hunting, cover letter, need some help interviewing, maybe you're looking for an internship, anything of that nature, we can help you. Okay, we are now located in the Student Center building. We moved last semester. We're down on the first floor in room 112, kitty corner from Subway, so we're kind of across the lobby from Subway. You can contact me at the 5155 number there, or the best way to get a hold of me is via email, which is there. And if you do have any questions, need any help, want to set up an appointment with myself or one of my colleagues, reach out to us. We're here to help. Okay. Again, thank you so much for having me come in. I really appreciate your time. And again, if you need any assistance, please let us know. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank
I will be
you.
in touch soon.
Okay.
Next
Thank you.
semester.
All right. Sounds good. Take
Have a
care.
good one. All right, everybody. Let's go over your upcoming assignments. All right, so you should be completed through unit number 6, module number 4, part 2. And that's by 11:59 p.m. tonight. The mock interview activity, the actual mock interview assignment, a critique of that mock interview that you've completed, and then your time management planning for unit 7. Just a quick note about the mock interview. You want to make sure that you videotape it, not just tape the audio, because you're going to be critiquing your mock interview, and you're going to want to make sure that you can go back and visually see it as well, so that you can critique your nonverbals and things like that. So you may want to take a look at the critique first so you can see what I'm going to be grading you on for that. And then by this Sunday, you want to complete Unit 7, Module number 1. So anything that you haven't completed that is due, go back. Even if it's late, please complete it for some points to catch yourself back up. Unit number 7 is our final unit. We are almost done. We have next week is our last final meeting with our guest speaker, and then you have a few days until your final culminating assignment is due, where you'll be basically putting everything together that you've done throughout the semester, putting all of your journals together and your different assignments, and kind of reflecting on overall what you've learned. So make sure, stick with me. We've got about a week and a half to go or so. And you're almost done. So get back in there and complete all of the assignments that you can. Are there any questions on anything that is due by tonight? Also, obviously, if you did not join our meeting and you're watching this video, your alternate assignment will be due as well. Please type any questions that you may have into the chat box here. If you don't have any questions, feel free and type a no there, just so I know that you don't have any. And we will wrap things up. All right, that was 3 of you. Anyone else? All right, well, thanks again for a great meeting today. Hopefully you learned a lot about interviewing, and that will be beneficial to you for your upcoming assignments. Keep up the great work, and I will be talking to you next week. If you have any questions about any of the assignments or anything, feel free to email me, and I will talk to you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.